to turn things around?
Well, it's possible you could need a year or even two, but in circumstances where people could be dead by the time you're asking for is over, you will have to move in fast. You realize, according to a number of Kenyans, one of the reasons why the cost of living is high, especially in matters of food and fuel and electricity, are, I think, for fuel and food subsidies that would have cushioned the poorer Kenyans were removed. And many people have this feeling that it is a push from the IMF and the World Bank that is making the government do that. So there are certain things you can't wait. You can wait for long-term measures to take place, but if people are dying, and I can assure you, life in this country is unbearable. Anybody talking about waiting perhaps doesn't live in this country. And therefore, there's so much government can do. In terms of, for example, the energy sector, there's so much corruption. You don't have to wait to deal with corruption and theft. See? So there's a lot the government that they can do later. And even a lot more that are beyond the government's control, that is beyond the government's control because of international issues. But yes, there are things that cannot wait.
So, Farah Malim, do you support the austerity measures that were put in place by this president and his government in order to secure that IMF loan, knowing that the same austerity measures have either driven up the cost of living or kept the cost of living high for ordinary Kenyans?
The cost of living did not become high on the assumption of office of this current government. The cost of living was high even before then. As a matter of fact, in the case of the staple food, the maize meal was more expensive that time. So it was over 200, well over 200. Now it's about 200, maybe less in some cases. But you see, let me tell you one thing. These people, we were part of a kind of an informal coalition through something called the handshake, when the former president and our coalition leader, we basically got together. So for the whole of the bulk of the last term, the 5 years of that term, and at least in the very least about 4 years of that, the current president was not in the mainstream. He was basically somebody who was hunted and haunted. And this election was for us to lose. And we lost it nonetheless, because even as we were getting closer to the elections, all the predictions, all the opinion polls did indicate that this was a very close election, and very too close to call. And indeed, it was too close to call, because they won with a very small margin to avoid the second round. Now, for us to begin telling them that people are going to die before a year ends, and for the 4 years before that, the current president was nowhere near power. The power was basically concentrated in the former president and our own leader, whom we hoped to make the president. I think, to say the least, is very unfair, and it's extremely dishonest. And in any case, when you go to even without the subsidies, the fuel prices are more or less the same as what they were then. So basically, what we have also kind of a catch-22. This country is broke. These people took over a broken system. There was no money. There were no reserves. There was nothing. And basically, everybody believes that these were things that were abused. The subsidies were abused, and billions of Kenya shillings were stolen through that. We need to have a forensic audit of all that to find out exactly where that money went. But it's only fair for us to give a little bit of time, in the very least a year, to this government for them to begin now correcting the things. And they have started correcting some things. So I think for us to come out into the open, look, you can have people demonstrating as a constitutional right. It is not a spontaneous demonstration that is being done by Kenyans who are unable to bear the cost of living. No, it is one that is called for by our own coalition bosses. The leader, Raila Odinga, is the one who called for these demonstrations.
So Farah Malim, if I can just jump in. If I can just jump in here, should you still be a member of the opposition coalition? Should you be in a coalition with Raila Odinga, given that so far you have been critical of the positions he's taken and you've been rather supportive, at least in this program, of the government, and you're in favor of giving them a grace period, should you really still be politically in a coalition with Raila Odinga?
Can I explain to you one thing? In my constituency, I put in more efforts and more resources to get all the votes for Raila. As a matter of fact, Raila Odinga had about 23,000 votes in my constituency in the last election, while Ruto had only 508. Most of them were not the locals, not my own people there. These were the government workers who were there. So we did everything we could have done. We were there on our own volition. I have been in the opposition myself for the longest, and out of a principle. But the country my loyalty is more so to the country than to an individual. It has to be to either a principle, an ideology, or to the nation itself, not to an individual who's going to tell you, wake up, run in this direction, run in the opposite direction, and more often than not to achieve anything for the country and the people of the country. Because Raila was the one who was defending the high cost of living just before the elections. And it's there recorded. And then he suddenly comes out there now and says, the cost of living is expensive. I'm calling for a mass action. It doesn't happen like that. When the cost of living is high, it becomes spontaneous. It's the masses who are unable to deal with that cost of living and come out into the streets. This is different. This is a political demonstrations. And by the way, the changes, they can say that you promised to bring down the cost of living and you haven't brought it down. But who took it that high up there? It is Uhuru. And Raila was very close to him, courtesy of their relationship that time. So dishonesty, in my opinion, is not something one has got to have a loyalty to. My loyalty is to my country. I oppose them. I am not in KK or what the president's what they call coalition now. I'm still in my coalition, but I don't like the way the leader of that coalition right now has personalized this thing, and I'm taking it to a different level altogether. All right. You are creating a situation. We have had similar situations before, when mass actions.
Okay, I've got to let Bina and Herman speak again, sir. All right, but thank you so much. And by the way, just for our viewers who are less familiar with Kenyan politics, when you say Uhuru is responsible for the high cost of living, you mean, of course, the former Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta. Bina, Herman, I saw some raised eyebrows. I saw some smiles. Let me go to you, Bina. Do you feel that the government deserves to be given more time to tackle cost of living issues? Is it unfair for the opposition to try and put so much pressure on them now in the streets, when they've been in power for, what, just over 6 months?
First of all, if at all